It's my great pleasure to introduce the first student of the afternoon. Please welcome Aaron Holthus.
Thank you, Marco.
Aaron is a bassist and composer from Kansas City. He graduated with honors from the University of North Texas with a BM in Jazz Study, earning the award of Outstanding Undergraduate in Jazz Studies from the faculty. He played with the 7-time Grammy-nominated 1 O'Clock Lab Band and has co-led the jazz group Oak Trio, which released its debut album
Liminality.
Liminality this year. You explain that one, what it means there later. And
presentation.
Okay, different presentation. I also want to mention that Aaron has been traveling with us to Chile this year, and I could see what a great asset he is also as a teacher, not just as a musician. He's been doing an amazing job with us this year. So it's a big, big pleasure to introduce Aaron. Go get him. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. So my project for the year is called Tasting Notes. It's a coffee and music crossover project. So the main point of what I wanted to do was write new original music inspired by some of my favorite coffee, two big passions of mine. So yeah, why coffee? I think that coffee is one of like many crafts that can get overlooked as not having as much depth or complexity. And when I started getting into coffee a couple years ago, I really learned a lot about this third wave movement in coffee, which is currently going on. It's just the latest trends of growth and sustainability and the way people roast and consume coffee. And the baristas and roasters that are working right now are really producing high quality products and devoting a lot of times their entire life to making really great coffee. And the variety of products and the quality that they come up with is something that really inspires me, and I wanted to showcase that. They also engage in something called direct trade, which is with farmers. You've probably heard of fair trade coffee. It's similar, but direct trade is when a roaster, a buyer, whoever is literally going to a farmer to buy from them. Fair trade, you still have somebody who's collecting a crop and then selling it later. It's kind of a middleman. So with direct trade, it encourages better growing practices because the people who are most interested in good coffee are the ones looking at it and buying it. And since there's no one else negotiating, you can really get a fair price for both the farmer and the coffee roaster or whoever's buying. And that's pretty important for the sustainability of that industry and ethics. What I also really like about coffee and other culinary arts is that they happen once and then it's over. It's never going to be the same experience twice, and that's a lot like live music. The reason I think most people go to see live music is because you get a unique experience that's not going to be replicated, and it's the same with an individual drink or a meal or anything you consume. Even with the same beans, the same methods, one cup of coffee is not going to be exactly the same every time. And that's something that's really interesting to me and just makes it a richer experience. Also, just because coffee is not something that's used often as inspiration for art. In general, I'm a lot more interested in the culinary arts than some visual arts, and they inspire me a lot more directly. And so I was happy to use a source of inspiration that I don't see a lot of other people using, and that really means something to me. So these two guys up here, the guy on the right is George Howell of George Howell Coffee Company here in Boston. He's kind of one of the pioneers of the third wave movement. He started the Coffee Connection in Cambridge in 1976, which got really big, and it was like a big coffee company here in Boston before it was bought by Starbucks later. And then he restarted his own company in the mid-90s, which now is a really, really excellent roaster. These two guys on the left are two farmers that work with George Howell, actually Walter Mathagu and Patrick of the Mamuto farm in Kenya. They inspired one of my pieces that we'll talk about later. So there's actually some science behind this kind of phenomenon too of taste and sound, or any two senses, and it's called cross-modal association. To kind of illustrate what that means, I'm going to talk about this first Oxford University study. So in this study, they had a group of participants tasting two wines, and beforehand they had paired these wines with two different pieces of music that were being performed live. And what they found at the end, they asked participants to match the wine and the music, or to just describe the taste of the wine or how they heard the music. And they found that overwhelmingly people identified the wine that they had chosen to accompany the music. So there was a really consistent way everyone was interpreting this wine goes with this music and this one goes with the other one. And additionally, compared to people who didn't hear any music at all, the participants who tasted wine and listened to music described the wine differently. So they had different ideas about how acidic it was, or the sweetness and the flavor. The music was actually affecting how they responded to that. And another quote from this Wesleyan study that I had to include. Participants match tastes that are perceived to be unpleasant with sounds that are similarly unpleasant. Example, trombone sounds. Yeah, no love for trombone players from the scientific community. And pleasant piano sounds being pleasant sounds, of course. So these are 6 of the coffees that I tried. They were all in the running for writing new pieces. They're from all over the world. We have one from Brazil, Rwanda, Kenya, Honduras, Panama, and Peru. I ended up using these 3 on the right, which are all from George Howell, and the one far on the left, which is a counterculture coffee. This is the first piece, and for this one I'll go pretty in-depth to my process because it was pretty similar for each coffee. So what I would do is I had a bag of coffee. I would brew it in the morning, and I would take notes about how I brewed it. Here I said I used the V60 dripper method with a medium fine coffee grind. I put the date and stuff about the coffee. So then as I'm tasting, I'm sitting at the keyboard and playing the ideas that come to me from this coffee. And I did this without knowing anything about the music of the region, which I researched later, so I wanted it to be purely influenced by taste. And I gave myself a little bit of criteria, and this was also the way I naturally felt like interpreting the coffee. The thing about coffee, universally I think, is that there's usually some acidity, there's some bitterness, and then with good coffee and the kind of stuff that I wanted to taste, there's always sweetness and fruitiness. Because coffee is a fruit. So the sound that I associated with that is usually with some dissonance. And I used a specific harmonic device called a tetrachord, which is like 4 notes in a row. It's like half a scale. Because those notes are all close together, and so you can have a lot of different sounds within different tetrachords, but there's still some dissonance, and it's still intense because they're right next to each other. That's the way I kind of experienced the coffee too. And this coffee in particular, I found pretty tea-like and light, and I reflected that in this other melody below that says A section, with wider intervals and more song-like, so I wanted it to be really clear and easy, kind of, so it's more diatonic melody. So I'll play an example of these tetrachords right now. So like I said, a tetrachord is just 4 notes in a row. So that's the first chord here. And in particular, this line that says B section starts with this tetrachord and then kind of develops. And that was how the flavor would develop for me. If you're a coffee enthusiast like me, you might know that feeling of you get the acidity and the bitterness first, and then it kind of develops into something sweeter. So this chord progression here at the beginning goes to me like with some from this tetrachord to some more dissonance and something like that. So it's kind of going back and forth between some more tension and some sweetness. And then this melody at the bottom is So you can hear the intervals are open and each new note goes higher than the entire idea before. So these were things that I just thought really represented what I was tasting. And sometimes I would do this for days or weeks, depending how long I had the coffee, and I would be taking so many notes and end up with a ton of material to work with. I'm going to move back. So, once I had all the notes that I wanted, everything, I thought I'd really extracted what I needed from the coffee, then I would start doing some research on the region that the coffee's from and more traditional and indigenous music. In this case, my teacher, Oscar Stagnaro, who's here, gave me this recommendation. It's a piece called Valicha by Raul Garcia Zarate, who's a traditional Peruvian guitarist. He actually died recently in 2017. So this was another piece of inspiration I used for this piece. So what I wanted to take from that was specifically a phrase structure that's more evident in a longer clip of the music, but it kind of, rather than just being 4/4 or something really straightforward, it has some phrases that are in groups of 3 and 2 and are a little bit irregular, at least to my ear. So I copied some of that phrase structure. And then also because the use of flutes and this kind of texture is common in Andean music and stuff that's in the mountains and places where coffee like this would be grown. So I wanted to have kind of a flute-like texture too, even with just a kind of normal jazz sextet. So I put the alto sax on top of basically the whole piece to give it a little more of that flavor. So once I had done all this research and the notes, then I would combine everything into as coherent a piece as I could. And here's the first example of that. So I followed a similar process for all 4 of the coffees I used, so I won't go into all of this. But this next one is from Kenya. It's called Mamuto AA. It's a really nice coffee from George Howell. So besides some of the what I took from the notes, I found this video. So the two farmers from the first picture, Walter and Patrick Mathagu, are from the Kirinyaga region. That's on the kind of on the southern slopes of Mount Kenya, and they're from the Kikuyu people. So I found this welcome song, this dance. So I took that melody, which notably is kind of over a straighter 16th note bass drum pattern, which is something that's typical of kind of West African music. I didn't know that it was present in more East African stuff too, but it's in the Rwandan piece that I do later. So I wanted to incorporate that element and to use this melody and to combine it with something from my notes. So here's just a little bit of that. I'm going to skip ahead because I'm really sure what I'm talking about. So there's a little bit of that. So the next piece I did was a kanzu that's based off our Rwandan coffee, another one from George Howell. So I had to split this one into two sections. Sometimes it was really difficult to try to combine everything that I had from my notes and my research into one piece. So this one is a little bit split. I'll play the second section a little bit that's based off of this dance from Rwanda. And also, I found over the course of this research that some music in some indigenous peoples are really not well documented. So some of the only information I could find about Rwandan music is kind of unidentified. I don't know what this dance was. I couldn't find a similar one, at least in a small amount of research. But from here. So I took a melody from that as well, which is transcribed down here at the bottom, and based second movement based on that, and then harmony that I had taken from some of my own notes. So the last piece I wrote, I'll go through this quickly, is from Brazil, and there's a lot of documentation about Brazilian music, so this one was not so much of a problem. But I took some from my notes, and then specifically this rhythm, which was really powerful, and I found in this video by this capoeira master, Mestre Cordion. This rhythm is called Salbento Grande, and I took the rhythm and moved it over to this bass line.
Salbento Grande was a call for the fight. This should move to break the bad according to the variations. The rhythm of Salbento Grande was basically it's like this.
So there's that, and then here it is incorporated into the piece. So just a little bit of that. You also, the texture of this one, I want it to be different because, I don't know if you can see these notes here, but this coffee was grown at a significantly lower altitude than some of the other ones. And it was also processed naturally rather than being washed. So just short coffee lesson on this. Because they're at a lower altitude, they're more heavily oxidized. And so there's more, when they're roasted, there's more like caramelization and more of the carbon gets burned off. Also, because they're processed naturally, the fruit part of the coffee cherry just dries away. So you leave the cherries out in the sun rather than washing all the flesh off the fruit. And what that does is as the fruit is kind of rotting, actually, it's leaving a lot of flavor in the seeds, which are actually what we think of as coffee beans. They're the seeds of these cherries. So that influenced the flavor a lot to make it different than the other pieces and kind of darker. Right now I'm talking with some of my friends at George Howell and Counterculture Coffee, which are two of the coffees that I used for this. I'm planning an event by the end of the summer. I'm working my best to get it on the books for a tasting and debut of this music. So you should be able to taste all the coffees. George Howell has agreed to provide the coffee samples for this. And then hear the music either live or recorded, because I think that's a really special element of this, obviously, coffee and the music together, that I think should really go together. And also I want to kind of launch Tasting Notes as a brand, possibly developing into an independent label to encourage other artists and more recordings influenced by really anything culinary, by taste, and to explore that whole world of inspiration that, like I said, I don't think has been too heavily explored. Thanks to all of you, Bruno and Oscar, who are my advising committee, Marco, Danilo, everybody at Global, especially Terry Lane Carrington and John Patitucci, George Howell Coffee, who have been really great for me, the band Andrew Boudreau on piano, Sebastian Kuczynski on drums, Juan Felipe Mejia Tobon, Aidan Lombard, Nathan Rising, Sam Hart, and Eric Stillwell. And then engineering help from Daniel Babai, Janine Cowan, and Margot Franken, my mom and dad who are here. And all my classmates at Global, you guys are amazing. Thank you.
Aaron, yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Aaron. Wonderful. Comments? Bruno, you want to start since you're the advisor? We blame you.
I can smell the coffee in here. It was a great pleasure working with you this semester and see this project from start to finish growing, and the compositions growing from small beans to big plants, I guess I should say. I was very impressed by your compositional talent and your playing talent, and a very intriguing project for me to see how you made the connections between taste and listening. What do you think of doing after? I know the cupping is coming up, and how do you see work using this project in the future?
This one specifically, I forgot to mention, I have been talking to George Howell specifically about marketing the coffee with the music. So I'm going to release this music eventually. I don't have a date set, but I'll be including links to their coffee, which you can order online from anywhere, so you can combine the experience yourself. And for them to include something about the music on their website with the coffee, and when you buy their coffee, that you can take the music home with you too for free. That's the immediate vision for the project. And then it's something that I want to continue writing for, because when I travel already, I find all the best coffee shops and coffee roasters, and collaborating with them is just kind of a no-brainer. As long as I'm out there, I want to be writing new music and bringing attention to roasters and baristas and everybody who I think deserves that kind of attention, and by extension the farmers that they're working with, because the direct trade thing is really important for coffee growing communities, especially like the one in Rwanda. The economy of Rwanda is kind of devastated by the Rwandan genocide.
Yeah.
So this is one of the ways that they can really rejuvenate their economy is by direct trade. There's people like George Howell are bringing in a lot of money to pay for really good coffee. So it's encouraging them to really get good at their craft, and then injecting a lot of money into a place that really needs it.
Right. I think we talked about having a possibility of having a code on the coffee bags, so you could download music.
Yeah, I'm planning to do a digital-only release for this music, so that you can just follow a link on the coffee or on the website to Bandcamp, probably, and you'll get a free download of the music. So hopefully it will be present everywhere that the coffee is present.
Okay, great. Have you thought about doing a presentation for schools or in other situations?
I haven't. I was really just eyes focused on this one.
Okay.
But I would love to do it again.
Yeah, I think you should. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Beautiful music and great presentation. Thank you.
Aaron, great work, very creative. I wish I could do that with hot pepper sometime in the future.
You can. Join my label.
Yeah, but the music will be like all trombones. No, I'm very honored that you picked Peruvian coffee, actually. I know there is not known our culture that we have coffee, but we also have good coffee, and that's one of the proof. Question, any of these coffees were decaf coffees?
No.
Okay.
That's all I'll say.
That's the next step.
Yes.
The next project. Now, I mean, the texture that you obtain with the sonority of each of the tunes is very interesting, because probably that's what you felt in that moment. If you feel like sad, or if you feel like happy, or and then in comparison, and then including elements from the tunes that you picked up. I mean, I don't know if you've never been in Peru or Rwanda or Brazil, but this is a great way of approaching that stuff in a way, like through food especially, and for musicians, coffee. So I know that you probably spend many nights with no sleep after all this. But again, congratulations, this is great, man. And the composition is unbelievable.
Thank you.
Very good.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
A lot of things. I'm glad that you focused and actually made that distinction for us between fair trade and direct trade. Very interesting. I notice, as you close, that you are participating in the coffee economy. You are putting the weight of your music behind something that you believe is good. Another just kind of tangential question, do you roast your own beans?
I do not.
Okay, just curious.
It's kind of a thing where I have too much respect for the people who are already doing it way, like George Howell is an incredible roaster, by the way. Encourage everybody to check them out downtown, but it's like I'm very content to purchase their product and support the coffee economy and just leave it to the pros, so to speak.
In your research of this project, did you learn things about the history of coffee or the politics of coffee?
Not so much the politics. I learned a lot about how it's grown and roasted and the history of it in the United States, but that's about as far as I went, actually.
Yeah. It just reminds me of something that I heard earlier this year that talked about the, the politics and, how coffee began to be sold all around the world, trade, all of that. It might be another component that you think about incorporating.
Yeah, thank you.
Aaron, I think I speak on behalf of everybody since we have a little bit more time, I think 4 or 5 minutes. Do you think you can possibly play back the last song, the one dedicated to the coffee from Brazil? Because I feel like it would be nice to hear a little bit more of it. It sounded very nice.
Sure, yeah. It's still only a clip, but I'll play the whole thing.
Okay. Yes, Aaron Holthus. Excellent. Thank you.